way that you can hold the space. So one of the things I want to do here is to try to evoke some of that through talking about lesbians through history. Because I think you can do this in the therapeutic encounter. You can notice that there are patterns that are coming up that you can evoke for your client. Okay. I'm partnering a lot of toxic shame here, so yeah.
I didn't completely understand. Notice that there are patterns that you can evoke for your client. Patterns of valuing lesbian eros.
Yeah. So that if you're familiar with myths and stories and the contributions of lesbians through history, then that's something that you can, and the importance of lesbian eros, then that's something that you can bring into the therapeutic encounter. You can educate your client about that. Okay. So I want to talk here now about exactly what is the double. Okay. First of all, so Jung had this idea that he had this brilliant idea actually that everybody has inside of them a contrasexual figure that lives inside the psyche that he called, if you were a man, he called the anima, and if you were a woman, he called that the animus. And his idea was that this figure is the archetypal foundation of romantic love in the psyche. Okay? And that when this figure constellates, that this figure actually drives the process of individuation and drives the process of wholeness. That it's the figure of the inner beloved. And then, again, he's talking in a completely heterocentric framework. He says it's the inner beloved who drives the engine of individuation. And if you think about it, if you've ever been in love, and you've ever fallen in love, you know what that does to your life. Okay? It like, you know, like everything is like turned upside down. It completely takes hold of you. It's inarguable. You're possessed. That's something that you have to like, that's like a kind of a call to become more yourself, basically. The thing is that what happens is that this archetype is what Jung calls it's the projection-making engine in the psyche. And so if you're familiar with the idea of projection, what the psyche does is there's a whole world, a whole mythic world always going on in the psyche because we're myth-making animals. And so even right now, if you sit here and you pay attention and you go inside, you'll notice that you're telling yourself a story. Or someone in there is telling a story about what's going on right now. Okay, and that's what we do as humans. We're always telling stories about what's going on. And we might think it's coming from out there, but one of Jung's great insights is it's coming from in here. Okay, it's coming from the psyche and it's being projected outward. And it's the inner beloved who drives that engine. Okay, and it can feel, it has a combination, when you're projecting, a combination of both. It feels like it's coming from inside because you're possessed. It's like I'm totally overtaken by these feelings of love and I'm going crazy. And there's this accusatory feeling toward the person who's provoking it. You know, like it's really that person's fault. And it's this enormous effort to pull that back and say, it's really in me. No, she's doing it to me. So there's this inevitable, basically this soul figure, you know, call the soul figure in the psyche is like what I was trying to help you kind of conjure at the beginning of this talk, which is like this person who's always with you, who's always got your back, who loves you, protects you, is always there for you whenever you need her. And, you know, eventually, with real people, eventually there's disappointment. You know, eventually it's not like that. Okay? And then there's this, it leads to this disappointment and maybe some kind of real dissent that one has to deal with at the loss of the ideal. This is the way kind of individuation works. This is the engine of individuation. There's this great inflation, and I'm at the top of the world, and then I'm like crashing and burning, and I'm in hell. And if one can work with the crashing and burning, and I'm in hell, and deal with what exactly is coming up, then there's some kind of integration that happens. The thing is that Jung was, at least seemingly, heterosexual. He had a really intense relationship with Freud, but we're not going to go there. And his view is, obviously heterocentric. Okay. So what Mitch Walker came along and he proposed another archetype that is also in everybody, and he called that the double, and that's the same sex. That's a same-sex figure in the psyche that is also a soul figure. So everybody has a contrasexual figure and a same-sex figure in the psyche. And depending on your sexual orientation, your eros is going to be attached to either the contrasexual or the same-sex figure. But but both those figures still are important in your psyche. They each play an important role, whether you're heterosexual or homosexual. And what happened is the Jungian, Jung identified this complex called the shadow, which is where all of the impermissible feelings get repressed down into. And that shadow figure shows up in dreams in the psyche as a same-sex figure. Okay? And Jung also proposed that there's something called the self, the big S, self, which is like the inner divine, the inner divine. And that figure also shows up as a same-sex figure in the psyche. So in classical Jungian theory, there was no theorizing about the double. It was a lot of homophobia looked at homosexuals and said, "Oh, this is a shadow problem. This is a shadow problem." Okay. So what Mitch Walker did is he identified that there is this figure called the double, who's this inner twin, this inner sister, and hence like the Queen of Heaven and her wild cherry sister, which we could say is the ego and the soul figure. And there's a relationship between the ego and the soul figure that is we're trying to cultivate here. Okay. So the double for women has 4 aspects: mother, daughter, sister, and lover. In other words, it's a figure of the feminine, and so we have all these different aspects. And what I want to propose is that because of heterocentrism, we are the only kind of relationship between women that's valued is the mother-daughter relationship. That there isn't a valuing that's gone on of the more sister relationship or the relationship of lovers between women. And in doing lesbian affirmative psychotherapy, I'm proposing that a really important piece of work to be done is to shift the lesbian from being completely centered in this mother-daughter archetype, and shift her over to privileging the sister and the lover. Which is no small task, I just want to say. Just from working in myself, it's just like this enormous, enormous challenge. of the things that happens to me here as I try to talk about this is that, like, I can feel my toxic shame, like, how dare you shift your attention from the mother and from being your mother's daughter to wanting to have your lesbian eros at the center of your life, and wanting to kind of project onto everybody here, like, that you're my mother, and you think that's, you know, a really bad idea, and so I can feel that there's like a lot of toxic shame here around that, and that sort of the forces that say it's really hard to, it's really like kind of not okay to get centered in lesbian love. But I'm gonna do it anyway. Fuck you. What I'm modeling here is something called active imagination partnering the kids, okay? And it's like what happens we do when toxic shame comes in to the psyche and kind of takes us over. So I feel like you feel kind of frozen. I can't talk. I'm dying up here. You know, everybody hates me. I'm so stupid. All of that stuff that, you know, that's from an object relations point of view, that's an internalized bad object. That's like kind of attacking my authentic self here as we speak, or as I attempt to speak some kind of truth about my something that is at the center of my existence and my essential self. And as I try to bring that forward and try to bring that that passion forward, there's this attack that happens. And so in one of the tools or the methodologies in Sapphic psychoanalysis is this idea of partnering kids, which means I've got kids who are now being beaten down, my little lesbian girls being beaten down, you don't have a right to exist, you don't have a right to exist, shut up. And I, as the ego, have to stand between her and the internalized bad object, which I would say is, I internalized, you know, starting from the heterosexual family of origin, and say, you know, fuck off and back off, and you don't get to get in my body and in my space. And I have a right to talk about this, and this is really important. So this is it's a process that you can teach your clients, because it's possible to become aware of these internal attacks that are going on all the time. If you notice, you know, if you pay attention, it's like, you know, there's really intense internal attacks, and in fact, you know, that's why we don't have to have like such an overt fascist state where, you know, people are like standing here with guns to our heads, because we've internalized the fascist dictatorship that says you don't have a right to live, and you don't have a right to exist, and who you really are is gonna like disturb the status quo, and you better shut up. Okay, and we've internalized that. So in that way, doing this work is a radical act for those of you who are activists and who have been activists, and I think a lot of people here have, out in the world. This is like kind of inner activism in the psyche. Because like if you've ever belonged to like an organization, a political organization, you know how crazy it gets, because all of this stuff is going on internally, and it's not being surfaced and spoken of openly. So it's a tool, it's a methodology for working with these terrible, terrible inferior feeling states of self-hatred and self-loathing that gay people, it's you know, I think everybody in the culture has it, because like I said, I think it's a way of controlling people, but specifically with gay people, it's profound. It's just profound, because we are different from our heterosexual parents in the family of origin. We don't get mirrored in the way that we need to get mirrored from our original caregivers. They're looking at us and they're seeing, you're going to have a baby. Your mommy's looking at the little lesbian girl and saying, you're going to have a baby just like I did, and you're going to breed, and you're going to keep the line going on and on and on. And that's a kind of annihilation of the self that's in the limbic system and in the body.